Hi everyone, I'm Ashley at the Silver Bay Public Library, and I am back with our tri-weekly story time. We are going to be reading the next chapter, or chapters depending on how far we get, of Floors. This is for the older kids. I also do a picture book version of this, but whoever wants to listen is welcome. So as I said, we are going to be continuing Floors by Patrick Carman today. Last time we left off having read chapters 2, 3, and of course 1 previously. So if you have not checked out those videos yet, make sure to do so. They are on our YouTube channel, so check those out, and then you can join us for chapter 4, Into the Pinball Machine. Let us begin. Alright. It was a beautiful summer night on the grounds, where Mr. Phipps had surrounded the carved hedges and giant bushes around the pond with tiny lights that shone like stars. The ducks had been brought down and swam lazily in the water, quacking softly at the setting sun, although Betty was not among them. "Dinner is served," said Miss Sparks, playing hostess to the guests who had chosen to attend the party. This included a smattering of short stays, including Jane Yancey, the ornery little daughter of the zillionaire, and her mother, Nancy Yancey. The father presumably had business to attend to on Wall Street. Miss Pompadour was there with Heine, who sat by the pond barking at the ducks. Meanwhile, Captain Rickenbacker was deep in conversation with Mr. Phipps about the shapes of the bushes. "I want a duck," said little Jane Yancey, who wouldn't leave the edge of the pond to come to the table. "Ask your father," replied her mother. "Do you want to cook the duck or put it on a leash?" asked Miss Pompadour, who had no patience whatsoever for spoiled children. Jane ran to the table and sat by her mother, complaining about the rude woman and her barking dog, and dinner was served. There was no main kitchen in the hotel, but it didn't matter. Dinner, along with every other meal at the Whippet, was catered by one of the finest restaurants in New York, 1 block off the property. The restaurant was owned by the Whippet estate, and it only served the hotel. If you had a yellow or green key card, you could dine there any time of the day or night and never pay a dime. Tips were also discouraged. Our guests could ring the restaurant by inserting a key into the dining slot in their rooms, and food would be delivered to their doors under silver domes on piping hot plates. The staff was not invited to dine with guests, unless you were Miss Sparks. And so it was that Leo had eaten dinner in the basement, a bowl of ramen noodles and a banana, while he stared into the purple box. His father was off in the expanse of the maintenance tunnels working on something or other when Leo made the call. "Remy, are you there?" A split second later, Remy answered, like he'd been holding the two-way radio next to his face, waiting for it to go off. "I'm here. Where are you?" "That's not important now. Who's in the lobby?" "Me and my mom. Your dad came through on his way up a while ago, but otherwise it's been quiet." "Do you know where Captain Rickenbacker is?" "I do. He's at the dinner party by the pond on the grounds." "Good. He went as I'd hoped." There was a leather string tied to his belt notch, and Leo pulled it out, staring at a tiny watch that was attached to the end. Betty was busy gobbling up half of Leo's dinner while he talked, a stray noodle hanging from her bill. "I've got Betty with me, and I'll need to return her and the rest of the ducks to the roof in just under an hour. In the meantime, I've got an errand to run. Call me if Captain Rickenbacker comes back, will you?" "Sure, I will." Remy had let himself grow too enthusiastic, and his mother looked up from behind the desk, where she was filing her nails. "You must be hungry, no?" she asked. She smiled and called Remy to the desk, where she gave him a cold tamale wrapped in wax paper. "You make me proud, my little doorman. Keep working hard and you'll make your way in the world." Remy went back to the door and, with one hand in his pocket, secretly holding the two-way radio in case Leo needed him. In his other hand he held his dinner, which was a repeat of what he'd had for lunch. Hearing the distant sound of ducks quacking on the pond, he gazed out over the grounds and wondered what Leo and Betty were doing. There were 2 ways into Captain Rickenbacker's room. On the 3rd floor, one in the hallway and one in the maintenance tunnel. Not all the rooms were designed this way, but there had been some problems over the past 2 years in that room, so Mr. Whippet had shown Leo a secret way in. Captain Rickenbacker had a habit of pushing large pieces of furniture in front of the door and refusing to come out, which was usually because his arch-nemesis, Mr. M, had entered the hotel. Mr. M was, as far as the hotel staff could tell, a figment of Captain Rickenbacker's imagination. It was usually Leo's dad, who was sent in to reassure the captain and move the furniture away from the door so that Pilar could clean the room. Leo looked down at Betty. "Be careful in here, okay? It's really no place for a duck." Betty didn't seem to be paying attention as Leo spun the combination lock on the secret door from the maintenance tunnel. On the room side, it looked as if part of the wall were swinging open, and when the door was closed again, it would look like there were no door at all. Betty waddled through the opening, and Leo, holding the purple box under one arm, followed her. He was careful not to let the door shut all the way, marveling at one of the most dangerous rooms in the hotel. "It looks like fun, but really it's a duck killer. Be super careful, Betty." She honked, nodded her head, and waddled forward. Captain Rickenbacker stayed in a large and colorful room known as the pinball machine. The pinball machine had windows high up on the walls, from which the setting sun cast a golden glow over all the parts and pieces. "I've always liked this room," said Leo. He was tempted to set the purple box down and play one of the 23 pinball machines that lined the bedroom wall, but he knew his time was limited. It would require some luck getting into the ring of rooms as it was, so there was no time for goofing off. The last thing he knew was for Captain Rickenbacker to return, thinking this little kid in his room was a manifestation of his made-up archenemy, Mr. M. If that happened, Captain Rickenbacker might go bananas and start throwing things, and there were some dangerous heavy things to throw in the pinball machine. Leo walked into the main room, which was long and narrow, in the same way that a pinball machine was. This was the centerpiece of the pinball machine, with giant molded pinball bumpers that doubled as couches and chairs, all of them lit up with bright lights and springs. The slanted floor was covered in lights and arrows and circled numbers, just like a real pinball machine. At the far end of the room was a hole as big as a tire, which had a flipper on each side. Behind that was the doorway that led to the third-floor landing. Betty waddled down the room and honked into the hole, listening to the echo as Leo looked around. While he'd eaten dinner next to the glugging boiler in the basement, he reread Morganza's message, searching for clues. Floor and 3 1/2. This, he was sure, meant to say there were hidden rooms in the hotel, and one of them was above the 3rd floor and below the 4th. He was now standing at the pinball machine, which was on the 3rd floor, staring at the ceiling and wondering what was up there. "Strike the purple ball in the kitchen by the hall." Leo walked down the slick, slanted floor, careful not to slip, and arrived at the control booth. He set the box down and found himself feeling happy about the fact that the purple ball was stuck under a blue ball. They were big, like bowling balls, and just as heavy. The blue ball would have to be played in order to retrieve the purple one from the track. In fact, the purple ball would need to be played as well, because the balls were stacked under a sheet of thick plexiglass. They were only dangerous after they were shot into play. After that, a person could really get hurt in the pinball machine, which was definitely why Mr. Sparks was so happy Captain Rickenbacker had stayed in the room so long. No one else would rent it. "Betty," said Leo, "we'll need to play a couple of balls. Stay in here with me, okay?" Betty didn't mind being picked up. In fact, she loved it. When Leo put one hand on each side and lifted her up, she could stand near the controls. She sighed happily. Leo pulled back on the giant spring-loaded ball whacker and let go, sending the blue ball up the silver rails and into play. It bounced off spring-loaded couches and chairs, spun through a whirligig, and headed for one of the 2 giant flippers. The room was alive with bells and zingers, lights blinking everywhere. Betty was mesmerized, concentrating on every move the ball made. Leo had planned to simply let the ball bounce off the flipper and land in the gutter, but he couldn't help himself. He simply had to slap the flipper buttons with the palm of his hand. The buttons were big, like dinner plates, and send the blue ball sailing back up toward the kitchen, where it knocked down several letters that spelled out Merganser. The back wall spun the score on white tiles with black numbers as the ball came flying back toward the control booth. It slammed into a bumper and took flight, crashing into thick plexiglass in front of Leo's face. Leo laughed nervously, thinking to himself, if not for the plexiglass, that ball would have knocked my block off. Betty honked nervously, flapping her wings in the small space. "Just stay put, you'll be fine." He let the blue ball drop into the tire-sized hole, then shot the purple ball into play. This was where it would get dangerous, because he needed that ball. He'd have to go out and get it. "Okay, Leo, you could do this, just take it slow." "You wait here," he told Betty, giving her a stern look that she returned with equal vigor. Betty didn't like to be bossed. The ball was bouncing wildly back and forth between 2 chairs as Leo jumped out from behind the safety of the control room. He was standing in the middle of a live pinball machine, wondering what it would feel like to catch a bowling ball going 50 miles an hour. The ball came free from the back and forth of the bumpers and down the floor at lightning speed. Leo dove out of the way, sliding into a bumper of his own and feeling it fling him back like a rag doll. As he got his bearings, Leo saw that the ball had bounced back up in an arc. He turned and jumped, catching the ball in the gut as it knocked him to the slippery floor. The weight of the ball pulled Leo down toward a round hole that would try to swallow him up, but Leo was a fast thinker, even inside a giant pinball machine. He held the ball in his arms, spread his legs, and caught hold of one flipper with each foot. If Betty were to walk on one of those flipper buttons in the control booth, he might not live to tell about it, and he watched the duck carefully. Betty quacked. She stared at Leo, then at the big, white buttons. Betty, no, please, don't! She held one webbed foot over the right flipper button, paused, then slammed it down. Leo leaned over to the left flipper just in time, but Betty was laughing now, waddling back and forth between the flippers as if it were the most fun she'd ever had in her life. It took 4 or 5 jumps back and forth before Leo dove past the gutter and landed against the door with a thud. That wasn't nice, he chided the duck, standing up with the bowling ball in his arms. His secret two-way radio squawked to life. Remy here. Leo, you there? Remy was whispering. Not a good sign. Leo pulled out the tiny watch on the string. 20 minutes gone already? I'm here, what's up? Nothing much, I'm bored. What are you doing? Leo thought about what he should say. Remy was still brand new and he barely knew him. What if he told him a crazy duck was trying to kill him inside a giant pinball machine? He settled for something slightly less weird. I can't talk now, I'm dodging bowling balls. Don't call unless Rickenbacker is coming up here, got it? Do you have any idea how lame it is standing at this door? You're dodging bowling balls and my brain cells are melting from boredom. You gotta get me in the game. Not now, Remy, stay focused. We'll talk about this later. Leo put his plan into high gear, setting Betty on the pinball floor and running up to the kitchen with the purple ball under one arm and the box under the other. He could barely hold on to both and nearly dropped the ball twice, which would have meant playing the whole thing out again and probably getting flipped around the room by an unreliable duck. He got to the kitchen and saw the spot he was looking for, a wall of lights in the shapes of bowling balls. One of them was purple and Leo felt sure he knew what to do. Strike the purple ball in the kitchen by the hall. 3 times fast. Duck! He set the box down on the counter, careful not to let it touch a bumper. Then he held the heavy purple ball in front of the round light and shoved. When the ball hit the light, it kept right on going, right through the wall, and dropped out of sight. Then the light was back. Uh-oh, said Leo. I don't think that was supposed to happen. Betty quacked from the floor and Leo looked down. The ball was back, rolling out of a different hole by his feet. I guess I should do it 3 times, right? He asked Betty. Betty just stared at the refrigerator, which was shaped like a huge flipper standing on end. When Leo picked up the ball, it was half as heavy. Different ball. Interesting. He shoved it at the light again, and again it melted into the wall, dropped out of sight, and appeared at his feet. This time it was a lot lighter, like an oversized golf ball. Is it just me, or is this thing getting more confusing by the minute? The one-way conversation with Betty was surprisingly calm, and Leo began to think maybe he was more like Merganser than he'd even thought. Merganser loved talking, but didn't often want anyone talking back. Leo was like that too. Speaking helped him think clearly, and ducks were awfully good listeners. One more time, and I bet this thing will float away. Leo passed the ball through the hole one last time, and when he did, Betty honked louder than Leo had ever heard her honk before. He was reminded in that split second of one very important word in Merganser's note. Duck! In this particular case, his mind flashed a message. Merganser probably wasn't talking about a real duck. He probably meant you're supposed to duck. Not one to take chances, Leo ducked, and when he did, the original purple ball, the one that felt like a bowling ball, flew out of the hole in the wall and back into the pinball machine where it belonged. It careened through a flipping turnstile near the ceiling, an impossible shot from any other angle, and all the lights in the room went dark. The ball bounced loudly down into the gutter, and when it was gone, the lights came up a dark purple. A deep hum filled the room as a hole slid, opening in the ceiling, and white light shone down on the dark surface of the floor. A ladder descended. Leo had popped back up when the ball flew past his head and had watched the pinball machine change. Now he was back on the floor, crouching down as another purple ball rolled out and bumped lazily against his foot. Leo took a moment to thank Betty for saving his life, then picked up the 4th ball. It felt like a ping-pong ball. Leo dropped it and it bounced right back up with a hollow sound. Leo thought of the other words Merganser had written on the box. And bring the ball. You'll need it. All right, I will, said Leo. He started walking toward the ladder, worried and nervous, as Remy's voice blasted out of the two-way radio. Captain Rickenbacker is on the move. He's headed your way. Leo had turned the room a deep shade of neon purple and opened a hole in the ceiling in the space of half an hour. He had no idea how to make everything go back the way it was. So he did what any kid would do. He threw the ball and the duck up into the hole and grabbed the purple box and climbed up the ladder. And that, my friends, was Chapter 4. For today, I think we will... Do we want to hear another chapter? I think we'll read one more chapter, because that one wasn't very long. We are going to be reading chapter 5 then, The Room of Rings, or The Ring of Rooms. Let's begin. When Captain Rickenbacker placed his yellow key card into the slot of his room, he heard an unexpected sequence of sounds, a swoosh, a slam, and a charge of electric energy. He jumped back from the door as if it were covered in kryptonite. He considered himself distantly related to Superman. Mr. M, I presume, he whispered, for he was sure his enemy was inside rigging all sorts of traps in his beloved pinball machine. If Captain Rickenbacker could have seen what was happening on the other side of the door, it would have almost surely confirmed his suspicions. The ladder shot back from where it had come with stunning speed. The round door in the ceiling slammed shut. The lights in the pinball machine went back to the way they had been before. The captain's keycard had activated a failsafe in the Ring of Rooms. Stealth was not one of Captain Rickenbacker's strong suits. He was more inclined to bold attacks and ninja moves, and so it was that he burst open the door and started shooting bowling balls into the room, one after the other, yelling all the while, "Take that, and that, and that!" Leo was alone on the floor 3 1/2 in an airtight room. There was no noise from above or below. Both the secret two-way radio and his walkie-talkie had lost their signals. He could not hear Captain Rickenbacker trying with all his superhero might to flush out Mr. M. The only noise Leo could hear was Betty's soft breathing, which was very soft indeed. "I think it's time I opened the box again," Leo said. Betty didn't quack, but she seemed to approve of the idea, and Leo slid the cover off, staring inside. Over dinner, he had figured out that the lid would slide onto the back of the box as well, and this he did so as not to leave it behind if he got lost in the maze. "I think I'm standing right here," he said, setting the box and the very large purple ping-pong ball on the floor next to him. He was pointing to a small round mark on the floor of the model, while Betty waddled off behind him. The box was full of colored rings of different sizes, and so was the room. All the walls in the real room were bright white, lit from behind frosty glass, and all the rings were positioned exactly where they were in the box. The advantage of having the box, it seemed to Leo, was that he knew how to navigate the complex maze before him. Betty quacked from farther away than Leo was comfortable with. She was a mischievous companion, known to wander off on her own, and he felt sure she was about to somehow open the door and send the ladder back into the room below. But when he looked over his shoulder, he saw that she was simply staring at a white wall of frosty glass, where a message had started to appear. Leo took 3 steps toward her through the only ringless space in the whole maze, and watched as the words appeared. It was as if someone were behind the glass, writing on a foggy window with his finger. "Did you bring the ball? Make it fly, make it fall. Mr. M." Something fell out of the ceiling, missing Betty by a hair, and a dark shadow moved behind the glass. Leo jumped back, afraid of something in the Whippet Hotel for the first time in his life. He wasn't alone in the Room of Rings, as he'd supposed, and what was more frightening still, Mr. M wasn't a figment of someone's imagination. He was real. Maybe Captain Rickenbacker wasn't totally off his rocker after all. Leo gathered his nerves and picked up what had fallen from the ceiling. It looked like it had been designed to work with the box. It had a metal platform and 2 handles sticking out, like the handles of a motorcycle. He took up the box and carefully placed it on top of the square platform between the handles. A perfect fit, if ever there was one. A new sound rose from behind him, the sound of wind. When Leo turned, the giant purple ping-pong ball had floated up into the air. "I know what I'm supposed to do," he said excitedly. "I understand." Leo told Betty to stay right behind him and to do exactly as he did, and somehow he knew she'd understood. She fell in line as Leo held the handles on the box and stared into the model. "I know the way out of here, but there must be some trick to it, and the trick must involve the ball." As he neared the floating ball, he felt what he expected. A strong channel of air was coming out of the floor, holding the ball. Leo twisted the right handle as if he were actually riding a motorcycle, and watched as the ball moved forward, slowly. Twisting it the other way brought the ball right back. He tilted the front edge of the box down and the ball descended, the flow of air from the floor growing weaker. Then he tilted the front of the box up faster than he could have, and the ball bounced off the ceiling. He leveled the box and the ball was back, holding steady in front of his eyes. "Well, Betty, I know how to get this ball through the maze. I just don't know why I'm doing it." Leo shrugged. There was nothing to be done but guide the ball and follow it through, and so he began. Everything started out fine, twisting and turning through 1 green, then 1 yellow, then 2 red rings. Betty hopping through the rings behind him. But then he came to a place in the round maze where there were 2 rings to choose from. They were in the opening that would send him deeper into the maze, closer to the middle and the very end. Would it matter which one he chose? He thought not, and sent the ball through the blue ring on the right. When he did, The rings filled with spires of electricity and the ball exploded into dust. Leo lurched back, nearly falling into one of the rings, and stared in shock at the purple dust particles flying everywhere. If there was such a thing as fairy dust, Leo thought, it would look like this. The electric charge had turned the ball into sparkling purple mist that stuck in Leo's round tuft of hair and danced on the wind. He tried to calm himself down, but could only imagine what would happen to him if he went through the wrong ring. Would he, too, be turned to dust, never to escape the Ring of Rooms or the Room of Rings? At least now I know what the purple ball was for, he said, but it's gone now. Leo was aware of the time ticking away, and this only added to his anxiety. Checking his watch, he saw that he'd already been gone a full hour. Miss Sparks would be furious about the ducks being left in the pond. Then she'd find that Betty was missing and go ballistic. And what about his father? What would he say if Leo couldn't be found? Leo was looking at Betty like she might have the answer to all his problems, but it turned out she had the key to a different question. She was staring at one of the frosty glass walls again, watching a new message appear. Leo joined her as an unseen finger wrote out 7 words before the shadow moved off again. Turn the handle back 3 times fast. Leo was beside himself with worry, but he couldn't give up now. For starters, he didn't know how to get the round door back open again, and even if he could get it open, there would be Captain Rickerbacker and his flying bowling balls to deal with. He turned the handle back once, a second time, then once more. A big blue ball, round and perfect, dropped out of the ceiling and was held on the wind in front of 2 rings. I wonder how many of these I get, Leo said to Betty, excited to have another ball, but realized he had to be extremely careful. If he got too far into the maze and ran out of balls, he might never get out. He'd have to remember exactly which rings were capable of turning him into fairy dust. Leo twisted the handle forward and sent the blue ball safely through the opening on the left, then stepped through himself. Betty flew carefully through the ring as well, and they were safely into the second circular layer of the maze. Looking at the model in the box, Leo saw many openings that led to the next inner level, but only one had an arrow pointing inside. He was excited again, less nervous, realizing that no one else but he could complete the maze and live to tell about it. During the next 20 minutes, Leo blew up 4 more giant ping-pong balls on his way to the center of the Room of Rings. He began to anticipate seeing them explode and felt less anxious when they did. Watching the orange ball blast into dust was particularly enjoyable because orange was his favorite color. He couldn't have known, for there were no mirrors in the maze, but his hair was starting to look like a rainbow, dusted with purple, green, orange, yellow, and blue as he arrived at the inner circle of the maze. He'd exploded the green ball on the way into his chamber and passing through the opening into the center of the maze. He felt as if he were standing in the middle of an igloo. The walls were frosty white and perfectly round, curved into a dome at the top. He stood there with his box and his duck and wondered what he should do, for the room was completely empty. The opening to the room, which he had just passed through, was suddenly gone, filled by a curved wall sliding down from above. Leo was trapped in a half circle of pure white, his heart beating faster as a terrible thought crossed his mind. No one knows I'm here. But that wasn't entirely true. There was one person who knew, and whoever it was began writing a message on the ceiling, just like he'd written the other messages before. Is that you, Merganser? Asked Leo, setting the purple box and the handles on the floor and reaching out toward the ceiling. Won't you please come out? He'd had his suspicions, but there was no way he could know for sure. It was a dangerous path he'd taken to the White Room, and it would be unlike his old friend to place him in harm's way. Then again, who else could it be? Helping him along, pretending to be Mr. M all this time? It was a short message, only 3 words. Take the ring. At first the message made no sense because there were no rings in the room to take, but then something small dropped through a hole in the ceiling. Quickly thrusting out his hand, Leo caught the object before it hit the floor. There was a deep silence then. Even Betty seemed to understand that something important had just happened. Leo knew it too, but he didn't say anything. There was something very special about the ring that had fallen into his hand. Something so special it nearly made him cry, but not quite, as he placed it in his pocket next to his mother's watch. Thank you, whoever you are. Without any warning at all, the hole in the ceiling got bigger and a blue box fell through it. It was the exact same shape and size as the purple box sitting in the center of the room. Leo caught the blue box as it was falling, finding it heavier than the purple box, but not by much. On the lid was a message. Don't turn me upside down. Don't open me until morning. The emblem of Merganser's head was on the box, right in the middle. I got another box, said Leo, very proud of himself for what he'd done. What do you think of that, Betty? Betty was growing very bored and extremely hungry. She honked irritably, staring at Leo as if to say, I've had it with rings and rooms and boxes. Get me to the roof or I'll chew on your shoes. We have been in here a while, haven't we? But I don't know how to get out. Leo wanted desperately to open the blue box, but he'd been told not to, so instead he took the purple box off the handles and set them aside. He put the lid back on the purple box and set the boxes next to each other, and then sat there for a minute, unsure what to do, until a new message appeared on the ceiling. Connect the boxes. Pick them up. Like all the earlier messages, this one appeared, then slowly drifted away, the frost returning to the glass. It only took a moment for Leo to figure out that the blue box slid snugly on top of the purple box on little wooden rails he hadn't paid any mind to before. The two were one now, inseparable unless they were intentionally slid apart. There was one last message being drawn with a finger on the glass, and this one worried Leo greatly. Hold on tight. He didn't see any reason to hold on tight, so the message unnerved him. Should he hold the boxes tight, or pick up Betty and hold her tight, or was the floor about to fall? The third thing Leo thought, the thought about the floor falling away, was the reason he was supposed to hold on tight. He found himself on a twisting slide and wondered if he was inside one of the tubes of the double helix. Those were far too narrow, he knew, but things had gotten so terribly strange at the Whippet Hotel that he couldn't tell up from down. Wherever he was falling fast, turning sharply every few seconds, barely keeping hold of the two boxes that had become one. He came to a harrowing U-turn and was tossed from the tube, landing squarely on top of the duck elevator. He made the mistake of turning toward the echoing sound of Betty sliding down behind him, and she crashed into his face, feathers flying as she regained her webbed footing and quacked angrily. Leo threw open the trap door atop the duck elevator and jumped inside, landing with a bouncy thud. He grabbed the boxes first, then the duck, and shut himself inside. It's getting awfully crowded in here, wouldn't you say? He asked Betty. 2 boxes, a boy, and a duck did take up some space when there wasn't much to be had. There were plenty of good news, though, as the small elevator lurched to life and started its slow descent to the lobby. Leo was in possession of the second of 4 boxes. He was halfway to somewhere, though he had no idea where. He had a special ring in his pocket, and he was free of the Room of Rings or the Ring of Rooms, whichever it was called. The bad news? The walkie-talkie had started working again, and Miss Sparks was screaming at him. Bernard Frescobaldi was back in the hotel, across the street staring at the huge, nearly empty block that held the Whippet Hotel. Something was troubling him. Milton, a cappuccino, if you please. Right away, sir, right away. Milton went to work at the rather elaborate coffee-making machine in the corner of the room. It had been brought over from Italy along with Italian espresso beans, cups, saucers, spoons, and a grinder. The room filled with the smells and sounds of good, strong coffee. Something's not right here, said Bernard as Milton delivered the small red cup topped with foam. What do you mean, sir? Milton returned to the machine to make his own drink, for he knew his boss would take some time answering the question. Someone is set against us, though I can't see who, Bernard continued, staring out the window as Milton returned. I think our plan is going to work, Milton assured him, sipping carefully from his own cup. How can we lose with you-know-who on the job? True enough, still I can't help but want to stack the deck more in my favor. Read me that travel entry again, will you, Milton? I think it may be of some help. Milton went to his silver briefcase, rifled through the contents, and found the entry in question. He sipped his strong coffee, cleared his throat, and began to read out loud. Morganzer D. Whippet, Travelogue 3. I'm traveling with George once more on the train between New York and Washington, D.C. George keeps telling me how much money I've gotten hold of and how hard it will be to spend it all. I keep reminding him I have plans equal to the task. I've only ridden 2 train systems, the one that leads to the boarding school in Pittsburgh and the one I'm on now. I adore one train, loathe the other, a true love-hate relationship. No travel was ever so dreary as the train ride to and from the boarding school, but the second train, the one I'm riding now, was mine and my mother's for a brief time. She'd been tired a lot for some reason, so I said we didn't have to go, but she insisted. Being 5, I was all too happy to agree. We should go! We took the train to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and she pointed out all sorts of things along the way which surprised me. When had she ever been out and about? I'd always imagined her folding my clothes and making my breakfast. Funny how I didn't realize how remarkable she was, how much she'd accomplished. Dad had said of D.C., take him to the Mint to watch them make money. It might teach him a thing or two. But my mother had other ideas. She liked rockets, history, art, music, and especially robots. Or could it be she knew I loved these things best and wanted me to see them? Either way, we never went back. One time on the better train of the 2 was all I ever got. After that, my mother was tired all the time. She hardly got out of bed, and I thought a terrible thought. Our one great adventure had worn her out. I'd exhausted her. M.D.W. P.S. I have a plan for a hotel, and in the hotel will be a railroad room. I don't think I'll let anyone inside the railroad room, at least not for a while. Bernard shook his head. Milton scrunched his nose. I've been all through the place, top to bottom. There is no railroad room, right? Either way, our plan is in motion. Things will get interesting starting tomorrow. Milton sipped the last of his coffee. I can hardly wait. And that is the end of chapter 5. And I will take my bookmark and mark it so that we can pick up again next time. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. That was Flores. And thank you so much.